Thanks for joining us today for the SEG Earth Day event. This is an annual event, a free event organized by a different chapter each year. And the aim of these events is to bring together both professionals and SEG student members to reflect on the challenges in our profession and introduce opportunities available and the roles of students and early career professionals in a world that's experienced rapid change. We're excited today to feature around the theme communication, cultivating the next geo-generation, and we'll be focusing discussions on how geoscientists can improve on communicating the importance of mineral exploration and mineral resources to the public and the broader geoscience community. I am Maxwell Porter, your moderator for today. It's my pleasure to join everyone here. My current role is the president of the University of British Columbia SEG Chapter, and I'm also the student committee chair for SEG. And I'd like to acknowledge the hard work by everyone else at UBC-SEG on this photo on the right here with the whole team, and they're helping today behind the scenes. We've also collaborated with the University of Zambia Student Chapter, so thank you for joining us today, and you'll hear from them later on. We'll begin with a poll just to find a bit of information about everyone. So we're going to ask you about your career, your location, and a bit about the theme today as well. So Duncan, if you'd like to put the poll up for us. And we'll just give it around 30 seconds or so. Feel free to fill this in. And then we'll see where everyone's joining in from and everyone's background. Okay, and we'll give it a few more moments here. Excellent, sounds good. I think you're good to display, Duncan. Great. Okay, so first of all, which best describes where you currently are in your career? So we have around 30% undergraduates, 40% graduate students. That's great. A few early career professionals in industry as well, and a few people joining us from academia. And a strong representation from North America and Europe, as well as South America. And great to see folk joining in from Africa and, oh yeah, good on the Australia and Oceania-based person as well for joining in today. And overwhelming yes for do we think geoscientists need to improve their communication? So I'm sure we'll all take a lot away from the conversations today. Okay, thanks for everyone for participating in that. Just quickly going through today's agenda, we'll begin with an introduction from Steve and keynote from Chris. We'll then transition into a panel discussion, followed by an introduction into SEG student opportunities and some closing remarks. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Steve Piercy. Steve is currently a professor in economic geology at Memorial University of Newfoundland and is SEG president for 2024. He'll be giving some insight into the role of our SEG student chapters and a few points on SEG's role in geoscience communication. So now I invite Steve to share his screen and we'll get underway.
Hey, let me see if I can do that. I think you have to take yours off and then I can share mine. There we go. Okay. Okay, so can people see this and hear me? We good? Okay. Thanks, Max, and thanks everyone for coming. What I'm going to give you today is I'm going to focus mostly on the student chapters from my perspective, and a lot less on our role in communication because there's lots better people to talk about that here today than I am. But student chapters are a fundamental part of the Society of Economic Geologists. There's been chapters at least to 1989. I went back and looked through all the old SEG newsletters and Discover, and there was at least a chapter in Colorado School of Mines in 1989, but now there's currently 105 active chapters in 31 countries, and there's a lot distributed globally. The chapters are a real hallmark of our student and early career program within SEG. We provide funding through what we call the Wallace Fund. In the last 5 years, this is between 80 to 95K US, and chapters can apply for funding for a variety of activities. A lot of them, they're focused on field trips and field training, things like symposia like that they host, as well as events like this. And I just put a few here. This is just from the January 2024 SEG newsletter. In my view, the core mission of SEG is really training, including field training. We're about technical content delivery, lifelong learning, network, and collaboration. And these are just two great examples here that embody what the student chapters mean and fit within that framework. This is one from the South African universities, and this is one from Australia. And again, we see field training, technical content delivery by using field work and mineral deposits as the mechanisms of that training, lifelong learning for early career, as well as industry and other participants, networking between various sectors, as well as collaboration. And these things are really important. And one of the criteria we use often for the funding of these chapters is evidence of collaboration between chapters. And so this has become a really important part of the chapter program. And it's events like this as well. And so while there's a training component, there's also these chapters are really about making sure that our industry, as well as our organization, has the next generation of geoscientists that are going to lead and run our organizations. And this is not a new phenomenon. This is just, I went through looking through the newsletters, and this is from January 1997. And the more things change, the more they say the same. Number one, what are the next generation of geologists? And economic geology is much beyond geology nowadays, but we have the same problem facing us right now with enrollment declines. We see universities changing where training is different. We need to have more experienced people. And these chapters are really the beginning of this kind of stuff to improve training, to ensure that we have experienced economic geologists for the broader industry in the longer term. And you'll hear a bit more later on about some of the broader programs, including for students as well as early career training. But the SEG chapters are really a key component of ensuring that we have opportunities for training for students, opportunities for them to interact with the industry to decide whether they wish to go into the economic geology as a career. And this is why it's a centerpiece of our organization. But it's also important for ensuring that SEG is sustainable in the long term. And this is just a picture from my old days. I'm the first president of SEG that actually was a president of a student chapter and had a student research grant. And this is just a photo from a field trip that my colleagues and I took from the UBC chapter in 2000 to the Carlin Trend in Nevada. And through this, we had fantastic mentors that ensured that we learned well. But it was a creation of a camaraderie where many of these people right now are leaders in the industry and also involved with SEG and are giving back to the next generation. And the hope is that these chapters actually are going to create the next groups of people that are actually going to run SEG and our industry. And that's kind of working itself out. And this is just a few of the SEG committees. And I've just highlighted a few people where I actually know the individuals that either received funding from some kind of student program or were involved with SEG chapters. And what you can see is that we're seeing more and more people running the organization that have been influenced by the student chapter program. And so beyond the training, it's also about ensuring that the next generation of SEG leadership is going to be there to run this organization in 10, 15, 20 years. And I'm sure that people that are here on this call today, you will see them populating these committees. And my God, is that someone here is going to be president of the organization at some point in the future. So a key component of our chapter program is ensuring the sustainability of the Society of Economic Geologists long term. Okay, when it comes to communication, I'm not going to talk much about this because this is not really my place, but our goal as an organization is advancing science and discovery, and really, we're really about providing the highest quality technical content and information globally in economic geology. Max gave a great introduction to this. You're going to hear more about it, but what I hope we provide is an honest broker about what we do well as an industry and organization, but also making sure that we acknowledge our failures and mistakes in the past. We have a checkered history, which is well documented, and communication is an important part to explain and acknowledge what we do wrong, but also our importance in going forward in the future, particularly now in the green transition. A key point that people need to be sure of is that we're not lobbyists for the mineral sector, and that's an important point. We're really about scientific and technical content provision through our journals, through our webinars, through our conferences, field trips, and so on. And SEG chapters are really key in communication, in my mind, and the sustainability of our organization, in many cases because they give the opportunity for younger people in the next generation of SEG members to provide folks like myself and others in positions their perspectives, as well as what we need to do better to ensure that they want to stick around and be part of our organization, and to ensure that our organization reflects the next generation's values and worldviews. And I'll end with 2 points that I think from a communication perspective that I live by, but I also think that are broader for our organization. And in Canada, geoscience is regulated, and as part of regulation, various provinces regulate, and they have codes of ethics. And I just picked out 2 that I thought were relevant. This is from the Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Newfoundland and Labrador, the province that I live in. And the second one is from the Professional Geoscientists of Ontario. And a key point of our code of ethics is that we should endeavor to interpret engineering and geoscience issues to the public in an objective and truthful manner. We have a role as geoscientists to explain what we do and why it's important, but we had to be objective, truthful, and not with an agenda. We all have biases, but if we wish to have public trust, we need to be objective and truthful and being honest. And then the second thing is from PGO, as a professional geoscientist, is encouraged to contribute to the understanding of public interests and issues and can assist in that. And I think it really is. There are many things that are happening at the modern day that we have a role to communicate, and I think is important for us to do that. And we're going to hear more about that today from our excellent people here. So I'll leave with thanking the organizers, Max, Chanda, and Lizelle. Thank you for doing this. And I really look forward to our speakers and panelists. Everyone on this list is very busy. And I'd like to thank you all for taking part and contributing to the Society of Economic Geologists. And on behalf of the organization, I thank everyone for attending and so on and so forth. So look forward to everyone else. Okay, thanks, Max.
All right, thanks, Steve. Great introduction there, and I think very topical as well. And we have a large student representation in the call today, so please get engaged with your student chapters. And I think that's really important going forward, and especially in the handoff when you pass down to the next generation there in your student group as well. But that's great. Go back to myself now, and yeah. I'd like to now proceed to Chris Jackson. So thanks, Chris, for joining us. Chris is our keynote speaker for today's event, and he is currently the Director of Sustainable Geoscience at the engineering consultancy Jacobs and visiting Professor of Basin Analysis at Imperial College London. So Chris will be giving his keynote presentation on a journey in geoscience communication. And I'd now like to invite Chris to share his presentation.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Max, for the introduction. Yeah, no, it's great to, I was going to say be here today, but I'm sort of in my bedroom because it's the only room in my house without any children in it. So I'm not in UBC with some of you today, but we'll make it work. So yeah, this is about a journey in geoscience communication, but more importantly, it's about my journey in geoscience communication. I think it's really important to talk about your own experiences. And then from this, hopefully you will take some bits of it that you think are useful that might actually help us inform the broader discussion about the role and importance of communication more generally in science. So what is science communication? It's quite straightforward. Science communication is the conveyance of facts, information to the public or the kind of or non-specialists. That's how we typically think of science communication. And there's a number of different vehicles to do that, of course. We can use print media, we can use podcasts, we can use blogs, we can do talks. There's a number of different forums in which we can convey this important scientific information to people who are not our peers. But what I want to talk about today is like, what's that like in reality, or what is one manifestation of that like in reality? What has been my journey as I've kind of become more heavily involved in science communication? And from that, hopefully we can take some lessons. And to do that, because it's a journey, we're going to use the timescale that I'm most familiar with, which is the geological timescale. I'm an old man. I'm not 541 million years old, but I'm quite old. So I'm going to have to translate this into years to make it fairer. So we're going to go back to the beginning of the Cambrian to 2014, which is when I first started my kind of science communication journey. And then we're going to come through to present day. So what happened in 2014? That was the first year, almost 10 years to the day, when I gave my first public lecture. On the left-hand side, and it was at the Geological Society, the oldest scientific society in the world. Very daunting. I don't know why they asked me to do it. They said, could you come and give a public lecture? I didn't know what a public lecture was. Up to that point, I'd only talked to my peers about really nerdy science stuff. And I was terrified because I was really confused as to how I could take this really complex stuff that I was really into and make it relevant and sort of tell the story to a general public audience. I decided to root that particular talk in something which I work on a lot, which is salt, because I thought that salt was common to everybody. Everybody knew what salt was. It's in the sea, you put it on your food. And then it allowed me to talk about other things to do with salt. And ultimately, the thing I study most is salt tectonics. So that's going to be something I'm going to come back to in a moment when I summarize like what was my lesson. But like rooting a talk in something familiar to the audience as a science communication device is often really powerful. A few months after that, on the right-hand side, I was asked to engage in a kind of newly arising science communication vehicle, which was being developed in the UK and around the world. And that was an event called Pint of Science. And this is where scientists were taken into pubs and they talked about the science that, you know, they did. And I use this as an example of, firstly, an example where, you know, whether it's the oldest learned society in the world or a little pub with 20 people who are drinking, listening to me talk about volcanoes in that case, these are both valid scientific communication endeavors, right? They're both ways in which we talk to people, whether it's a few tens or a few hundreds of people, they're both important. The other thing here is these, you know, having science communication talks in pubs has a whole raft of inclusivity issues, right? So thinking hard about where we conduct science communication is also important. So what did I learn at the end of the Cambrian? Well, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. You know, like I said, my talk the first time was about salt and salt tectonics, you know, so like keeping it focused around something the audience were familiar with. Take it back to basics. Keep the rigor in the science, but make it understandable. Make sure that when the audience leave your talk, they feel informed and clever. That's what my PhD supervisor taught me. Also, don't be afraid to use very simple devices, music, videos, rock samples. People learn and engage in different ways. So just like a bank of slides with graphs and things that you would normally take to a very technical conference may not be appropriate for the audience that you're trying to reach, you know, in a different forum. And also remember that science communication is a two-way endeavor. It's not just you broadcasting to the audience, it's you being aware of what the audience needs and what their level of understanding might be before you go and give your talk. So actually doing some research on your audience is not a bad idea, so that it actually becomes a much more discursive experience rather than it just being you talking to the audience. So moving forward to the end of the Devonian, I was asked to go and do a very different scale and type of science communication exercise. And that's when I was asked to go and be in a BBC 2 production, which was also on PBS Nova, called Expedition Volcano. And I just want to show you a trailer from that particular show to make some important points afterwards. So this sort of science communication, a TV show, is like a long way away from a very small club with 20 people watching you, okay? And it's a very important type of science communication. It reaches a really big audience, but it's a very different type of science communication, really glossy, really expensive. Also, as I highlight in my learnings from the end of the Devonian and sort of the experience of doing that TV show, was that there is this thing I like to refer to as the National Geographic effect. The National Geographic love these really glossy, showy science documentaries where the danger is given as much airtime as the science. And that's because they want to make it captivating for the audience. If they just saw somebody grinding up a rock sample in a pestle of mortar and getting no data out because the SEG, the analytical machine had broken down, that wouldn't make a very interesting TV show. Let's be honest. So the National Geographic effect is this tension between the science and the scientists and the actual thing that they're trying to make, which is a TV show for entertainment. And that's a very real thing. So I learned that there was this tension, and I've certainly taken forward a lot of the experience I had there in how I've kind of interacted with, when I've done TV things since then. Another challenge that arises, and another thing I learned at the end of the Devonian in 2017, was that a lot of people are very dismissive of science communication. A lot of people don't think it's hard science. They don't think that is an important thing for a scientist to do. And I, as hopefully you on this call would agree, our science will never be as important or positively impact people's lives if we can't communicate it to the people that matter. We can do great things, but they won't fulfill their full potential if we don't communicate it. So I would argue that being dismissive of science communication is deeply flawed. And another thing is jealousy. A lot of people don't like you getting kind of opportunities to go and do cool things, but that's just something as an individual you have to deal with. Moving forward, kind of beginning of the Jurassic, I was asked to be one of the Royal Institution Christmas lecturers for 2020. That lecture is shown on BBC Two every year or around Christmas. It's been going for 182 years. And I talked about the geological record of climate change. And there I am setting fire to something on stage. It's very showy, it's very glossy, it's super good fun. Takes 8 months of production, writing scripts, producing the demonstration. So again, it's this really big budget style of science communication, but quite different to the TV show. I bring this example up because I want to talk about not necessarily what we did in the show, but I want to talk about another important aspect of science communication, is that talking about scientists and talking about who doesn't get to do science and how that may impact the outcomes of science, I think is important. So the story here is that I was the first Black scientist to give a Christmas lecture in 182 years. And that was as much the story as what we were talking about, which was climate change. So I took that opportunity to talk about the fact that science communication, as stated here, is not just about facts and numbers. It's about all the messy stuff that goes on around science, race and racism, misogyny, homophobia and transphobia, and how those things impact people's access to science and the questions that scientists are asking and the way they're asking them. So science isn't just this zombie-like thing that happens. There are human beings kind of engaged in it and shaping it. And I wanted to talk about that. And the problem with that experience, as I highlight here, is if you talk about things which are science adjacent, like science communication, and not just the science, so COVID, climate change, sexual or gender identity, people may come for you, right? People will stay in your lane. We only care about the science. We don't want to talk about all these other things that seemingly have nothing to do with science. And it's my contention that science communication is also talking about those things as well, to make the public, non-specialists, or even some peers, let's be honest, that the way science works is a lot messier and a lot more human than certainly some STEM trained scientists would have you believe. So kind of coming forward from 2020 to today, like before I kind of wrap up and tell you about some general learnings, I've had the opportunity to kind of do radio shows. I've done podcasts. I've done silly things where I've gone on TV and eaten food. I've had some really good experiences in lots of different ways. And I've drawn on the experiences I had up to that point. And even now I'm kind of learning a lot from every opportunity I have to communicate or talk to people about science and scientists. So, kind of keep informing myself. And from that, what have I noticed have been some of the key challenges? I think we have a really broad public. And by that, I mean, we have at the top of the pyramid, if you will, are the policymakers, politicians. They're the people who take our science, sometimes filtered through the civil service in the UK, and decide how that science is going to impact lives and livelihoods. Okay, so we have that group of people. Right? Below them, though, we have a range of publics, and this is terminology taken from this study where they talked about people being science-tuned and interested and so on. And what I take as being positive from here, you might look at this and go, oh my goodness, not everybody's science-tuned. I don't think that's a problem, because if you actually look at those numbers, between 50 and 70% of people are at least science interested. And I think that for us as scientists is great. I think that means that most people we're going to speak to are interested in science. They might not know much about it. They might not really know how it impacts their lives and livelihoods, but they are at least interested. And that means we can kind of use it as a wedge, if you want, to get in and sort of talk to them about it. So I take heart from things such as this, because ultimately the public, as you remember or know, if you're in, no matter where you are in the world, there's so many elections this year around the world, the public vote. So having a science like aware public is really important for us globally, irrespective of us being science. I mean, as us being citizens, having a science-informed public is important. I think the other challenge is we have what we call a concerned public. The public are rightly concerned. Images such as this, Deepwater Horizon, mine tailings burst in Minas Gerais, you know, scary movies like, you know, some city being torn apart by an earthquake or something bursting out of the core. You know, the public often only see geosciences when it's like going to kill them or has killed them, when it's catastrophic geoscience. And what they don't see is all the time in geosciences is being really boring and like finding metals for their iPhones, right? They don't know about that. And I think that's the real opportunity, is to kind of keep talking about the times when geosciences is always around us doing things which are less glamorous, and sort of, you know, using these vehicles, okay, you know, when these terrible things happen or these ridiculous films are made, if conversations are started, it's still an opportunity to move that conversation on. So I think that concerned public is still a generally good thing. I think the public, another challenge is they're rightly confused. Remember, the Earth is a bloody great big place. It's really big. There's tiny things, there's big things, as I've shown on the left there. It's a really big place. The other thing is the Earth is really old. It goes back a long way. So you can see why the public struggle with the notion that we might be able to say to them, okay, I'm going to drill a well 4 kilometers below your house, and I'm going to find sandstones that I can tell you were deposited in a river. You know, it sounds wildly implausible to somebody who's not formally trained in geosciences, and rightly so, right? So don't forget that when you're undertaking science communication, that you need to be aware of where the non-specialists are coming from. They're not stupid. They're not disinterested. Like I said before, they're science trained, or they're science interested, sorry. But remember, the Earth is a complicated, big, long-lived thing and multi-scalar, and we need to appreciate that ourselves when we're talking to people. So what's the potential kind of way of solving this? You know, this isn't, we're going to talk about this in the panel. You know, inverting the pyramid is one suggestion put forward by Ian Stewart and Ted Neal. So as scientists, we typically do this, right? We typically say, let's start with the background and rationale and methods and data and blah, 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 blah. And it's all quite dry. And then we come down to results and conclusions, then we end, and then we get a citation for our paper or not. Whereas the public don't really want that, right? What they want to know is, what's the bottom line? Like, why are you doing this thing? Why is this important for me? And ground it in their hunger for knowledge or their necessity for knowledge, and then work backwards and say, so what? And then provide them with supporting details. The worst thing you can do, I think, is just to parade into some place where you need public consent and say, this is what you need to know about this thing we're going to do. It's much better to go in, given the cultural variability we have around the world, and actually talking to people about what they in their local communities and their local cultures feel are important to help them make an informed decision about what you wish to do with them or for them. Are we prepared? No. 15% of geoscientists in the recent study have any training in science communication or policy development. And as this statement here says, 61% of surveyed geoscientists consider that most scientists are so intellectual and immersed in their own jargon that they can't communicate with journalists or the public. That's worrying if we can't even talk to ourselves, really, or journalists or the public. You know, if that's our own view of ourselves, imagine what other people think about us. So we've got a long way to go to get prepared to do some of the things I'm advocating. So just to conclude, final slide, you know, I guess overall my geoscience communication journey has taught me that, captured here in Dolster in 2014, the plural of anecdote is not data, it is science communication. Science communication has this hugely powerful multiplying effect, which data can't really do, because data doesn't really speak to hearts and minds as much as how we tell a message to people. We saw that with COVID. I don't know if any of you were in the UK at the time. Every night at 6 o'clock, the government would come out and tell us something about our numbers and what the kind of, the spreading rate of COVID was, and suddenly science communication was on TV every single night. And in the case of the UK, done terribly, but it certainly, everybody became interested in science communication at that point. So it shows you how important it is to make people's, to change people's behaviors. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak, and I'm looking forward to the panel. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, Chris, thank you. That was, an amazing journey through geoscience you've had, and I'm sure lots of people will be interested to follow up shortly here in the panel discussion. So please put your questions in the chat for Chris, and we'll get underway with that shortly. And a few really good messages there. KISS, I love KISS. Keep it short, stupid. I'll remember that one. That's very memorable. Okay, excellent. Okay, excellent. So we'll now move on to the panel discussion. So of course, again, great message from Chris, and be sure to tap into that with the questions. But in addition to Chris today, we're joined by a great group of leaders in geoscience communication. Firstly, we have Taija Torvella, who's an associate professor at the University of Leeds and is an active communicator through her YouTube channel, Our Metallic Earth. Then we have Amanda McCallum, who's a consultant and president of Ignite Education and is regularly communicating with industry and various folks to ensure there's good communication between different groups. And we also have Kate Larson, who's also known as Groovy Geologist, who's a geoscience communicator and has been using social media to educate audiences around the world. So I'd like to thank all our great panelists for taking the time to join us today. And I would once again encourage everyone to submit questions to the Q&A panel, and we'll be monitoring the chat. And you can also direct your question to a specific panelist if you would like. So I'll now invite the panelists to join. So I'll stop sharing my screen here. Excellent. Okay. So everyone good here? Excellent. Okay, so we already heard Chris's great story, but I'd like to go through everyone else here. So perhaps starting off with yourself, Taija, if you could give us a little bit of your background, what interested you in geoscience communication, and then we'll move on to Amanda and then Kate.
So yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, Max. So yeah, I'm Taija Torvella. I'm actually from Finland originally, although I spent quite some time in the UK now. I got appointed at Leeds in 2012, so I've been here for 12 years. And yeah, over the years, it's just, I guess, this global trend, which is quite worrying, I think, that there's so much misinformation going on around various topics, and generally they are only the loudest opinions that we hear, and they're quite often very one-sided and even quite extreme. And I just thought, how can I help in trying to address that and making sure that there's also some more positive sides of geoscience that are heard, that those voices are also heard. And I always loved, since a little girl, and that got me into science in the first place. Since a little girl, I always enjoyed these documentaries, BBC and other documentaries about Jacques Cousteau and David Attenborough, of course. And I just loved the way they did things, just no fuss, and then just, presenting things in an interesting fashion and no drama. And I just thought that was brilliant. And I just sort of looked back to that experience, and I thought maybe this is what would be a good idea to do. And that's what got me into this, really.
Well, thank you for sharing, Taiha, and that's a great introduction, and encourage all listeners to check out Our Metallic Earth, and I'm sure we'll hear about that later on. But now I'll pass over to Amanda. Would you like to introduce yourself and what got you interested?
Thanks, Max. Hi, everyone. Amanda McCallum. I'm joining you from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada's Far East. I am a prospecting geologist, so I've been about 20 years, sort of a mid-career prospecting geologist. I do have a background in geology as well as education. So very early in my career, I actually spent time teaching internationally at a couple of international schools. I have a background in project management as well as governance. So I'm very much an interface with industry through my consulting company. In terms of interest in, I guess, geology, I grew up in a very small rural fishing community and was certainly surrounded by the rocky coastal inlets, which really first sparked my interest in geology. And there were no trees, so you sort of was forced to look at rocks. But certainly, I think over the last number of years, been having much more of a concern with this lack of this disconnect that people have with the earth and how the earth works. The earth is our home, so and like anybody, I'm just as concerned about this duality between the environment and the economics. So, and I've certainly felt very compelled over the last number of years to really speak up and speak out a little more. For me, communication is about connecting. So I spend a lot of time connecting with people, and that's a variety of target audiences. That might be the general public, it might be schools, in our K-12 system, it might be influencers, decision makers, elected officials, politicians. And I'm certainly to the students attending that, I certainly encourage you all to sort of find your voice, and we need everybody to sort of speak their truth and speak to certainly the challenges that geoscience, I think, is facing right now.
Well, thank you, Amanda. I think that's a great message for especially a lot of the students being the majority here. And I think that transitions nicely into Kate. So Kate Larson, I'm sure a lot of the students are familiar as, Groovy Geologist, but why don't you introduce yourself, Kate, and give us an introduction on why Groovy Geologist came to be?
Thank you so much for the introduction, Max, and for having me here. Hi, I'm Kate. I'm also known as the Groovy Geologist online. I'm a geo-communicator, though you might consider me to be a geo-influencer. What I'm influencing people to do is to consider geology as something that they want to learn about, something that a lot of people overlook. It's not one of the more popular sciences, especially on social media. There's a huge amount of people making educational content about outer space. You know how many space science influencers there are? It's insane. There was not many people at the time when I got into this in 2020 who were talking about geology, and I love talking about geology. I graduated with my bachelor's degree during COVID, so I had no one to talk about geology with anymore. So I started making videos online on TikTok and found that there's a lot of people who are interested to learn about this, who didn't know that they were interested. They came across this and they're like, oh, it can be that exciting. Here's someone who is very obviously stoked about this, and it's making me feel excited about it too, because I've come to learn that the excitement and passion that I have for my field of study is contagious, and I really love to be able to carry that on social media and in person when I give talks.
Well, thank you for your introduction there, Kate. I'm sure we'll tap into a bit more about the power of social media. I think it's an important medium going forward, capturing a lot of the younger folk. But thanks everyone for their introductions. I think we'll transition into questions now. So kind of a warm-up question here, and a few people have already got into it a little bit, but we'll start with what strategies can be employed to engage diverse audiences in geoscience communication? And are there any examples you'd like to share? And I'm sure there's a few mediums we can tap into, but perhaps we could start with yourself, Taija, and a little bit onto Metallic Earth and how that's been doing.
So yeah, of course. Well, If I start with a slightly broader view first, I mean, we just need to do more of it, as Chris pointed out. I mean, there's alarmingly small number of people who are, well, I'm not trained in any of these things, but I find that in general, especially in academia, I think geoscience and public communication is undervalued still. And at least that's a job for us academics, I think, to try and change that and try to ensure that people see that as a valuable thing to do, because it is all about making a more positive profile of geosciences. And it's just, yeah, we've just not traditionally been very good at communicating and engaging with the public, and we really do need to change that, as has been stated many times now. It is, I think, slightly trickier when you're in academia. I think people who are in industry, having done 2 stints in industry myself, both before and after my PhD, it is easier because you come in contact with the public a bit more often. We academics, we tend to engage much more just with students and fellow academics, so we really actually have to make a specific effort to reach out to the general public. And yeah, so my YouTube channel is just one example of that, and social media in general, I think, is really powerful tool these days. But then things like school outreach, for example. So we have an outreach team in Leeds, at the University of Leeds, and they just go out to schools in the general area and just talk to the pupils who are about a year from going to the university. And because it has become very obvious, and people don't know about geoscience, they don't know what it's all about. And quite critically, I think for young people, they don't know that there's actually quite a wide array of employment routes available within geosciences. And geology making it exciting is certainly helpful, but quite a lot of teens, when they come to the stage, when they're thinking about what do they want to do in the future, they just want to know how they're going to earn their money, how they're going to earn their living in the future. And lots of young people also want to make a difference to the well-being of the human race and to the planet. And I think to see these sort of school outreach efforts are really useful and helpful way to an important way to emphasize that as a geoscientist you can do that. And I would actually like to see much more engagement from industry people also doing this sort of activity, to going to schools, perhaps pairing up with academics and just going to schools and talking to young people, because it does seem to be making a difference. Our student numbers, I mean, I think this has been a global trend that student numbers have been going down in the past few years. But it looks like since we started this outreach program a couple of years ago, the numbers are starting to go back up again. So that's a good sign that this is working, and people are certainly taking this positively. So that's been great. So that's my take on it.
Thank you for sharing that. I think lots of great points, and I think going into the younger generation a little bit here, you know, I'll direct this at you, Kate, as well. This question, what's the power and scope of social media here? I think to kind of give us a lens into your world, like how big is this? How many people can you really connect with?
It's continuously surprising how many people use social media every day, how these social media algorithms work, and just the sheer reach that you can have if you are honing in on every single little aspect of these algorithms, and you're using the right hashtags, the right words, or you're connecting yourself with the right people. You can reach these audiences. You can reach young people who are interested or don't know but they're interested. But I want to go back to your point about not knowing what they can do with that. So when I reach these people and they're like, oh, I'm interested in this, they now come to me with the question, well, what can I even do with a degree in geology? How can I get a job? I hear that there's no jobs. So that kind of misinformation spreads, and it accumulates in my comments on my posts. And in experiencing that for a couple of years, I went on to make like a huge resource page that I would put on my, like, on your social media. You have like what's called a link in your bio. It's a little link that you click on in someone's profile, and it will either show their website or relevant materials. I put something in there that's directly, it's titled Thinking of Becoming a Geoscientist, and I put everything I could possibly think of in there. Anytime I have a video go viral, I see hundreds of clicks to that. Even if I don't make a video that specifically references it, I'm getting hundreds of people clicking on this, and it's increasing traffic to this really informative resource. And I did some research on it last year. I tracked all the analytics. I want to see more students become aware of the things that they can do, not just that it's an option, period, but where they can go with it. And social media is a really viable outlet to accomplish that.
Thank you for sharing, Kate. I think it's something we can all work on doing better, since that's a lot of the time the first things the students see, or the younger folk. And I'll just like to ask you, Chris, because you've had a transition from academia into industry now. Are you agreeing with these tools? And is there any, particular thing you'd like to point out as well as a particular engagement mechanism?
No, I mean, everything that's been said, I agree with. My only additional point would be is I think it's really important to go out and map your audience. I think quite often we presume to know what will be engaging or what somebody needs to know. And I think actually we need to do a lot more pre-engagement work before we engage. So finding out what the level of understanding is, what misinformation may have already been there, and then you can tailor your message much more precisely to that audience, because it's not just I'm going to take the same PowerPoints to all of these different schools. If all of those different schools are in different areas, or they have different socioeconomic circumstances, dominant in those schools. So I think that's the only thing I would say is being quite proactive about the style of communication before you actually stand up on stage, virtual or otherwise.
No, I think those are amazing points there, Chris. Okay, I think we'll transition into another question now, and I'll direct this to you, Amanda. What ethical considerations should geoscientists keep in mind when communicating to the public, specifically with regards to greenwashing, and maybe a short feel for what greenwashing is in today's climate?
I think when you touch on a theme such as greenwashing, it's a really big area for us to sort of dive into. It's multidimensional, it's very complex. But at the end of the day, when we look at the extractive sector, the mineral resources and mining, if you look at the supply chain from discovery through to production, and then you look at all of sort of the inputs coming into that when it comes to raising capital, a publicly traded company has to report, through the they have to report on what they're doing. So that means that we have to have transparency when it comes to, in particular, ESG. So that's the environmental, social, and governance standards. So companies right now are, whether it's on the exploration side or mining companies, it's challenging to raise capital. So because of that, companies and they're aware, I'm not explaining this very well, but they're aware of the challenges with raising capital. So because of that, I think there may be some leniency taken when it comes to reporting on how their activities are maybe more greener than what they are actually. So I think that we obviously have an ethical responsibility. If you're a professional geoscientist, then you're bound by a code of ethics. So you have to ensure that the information that the company is reporting on, and again, especially if you're dealing with, well, regardless if you're dealing with publicly traded companies or private companies, you have a duty, you have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that you are reporting ethically. I mean, that's bottom line. So I think we all have to ensure that there's accountability there, regardless of where you are in that supply chain. is what I'm trying to get at, whether that's trying to raise funds or you're in an early stage, prospect generation project, whether you're in academia or you're, a little further through in an advanced stage project, or if you're a developer or a miner.
No, thank you for sharing, Amanda, there. That's a really important message. And I see now that we're getting some questions coming from the chat as well. So please keep those going. There'll be lots of time here to ask those away. And we'll probably transition into a quick fire format near the end if we get a lot come in now. But one of the ones to start us off from the audience is, how can we effectively engage in communities where social media is limited or unavailable? So I think that's a great point in terms of outreach. And is there anyone that'd like to leap on this question? Teja, yeah, feel free.
Well, actually, it just popped it in the chat as well. So what I said earlier about outreach, I don't know what field Hallelujah is working in, but is there any chance that they could be in a position to assemble a team to go and just speak to local schools and inform them? Because that's a start, and hopefully informing other organizations about the activity, hopefully that will spread.
Excellent. And I think another question here we have is, well, we got a few on the same note, but essentially, what challenges have you faced conveying technical topics to non-technical audiences? So a bit of KISS maybe there coming back in from Chris. Perhaps we'll start with you, Kate. Is there any strategy you use in breaking down some complicated jargon into more digestible content?
In terms of in outreach in schools or online or in general?
I guess online. So how do you bring something that might have the technical language in geology and make it into a more accessible format when you publicize on social media, for example?
Right. My first go-to for that is, well, first I have to consider, what would someone who didn't go to school for this find interesting? And then I have to kind of think back to my first impressions of this sort of information. Like when I was a freshman geology student, what about this topic made me want to learn more about it? And I kind of try to hone in on that. It gets a little harder as the years go by, and it's been a long time since then. But I try to think about things from other people's perspectives. I gave a rock to my 7-year-old neighbor for his birthday, and it had fossils in it. I thought he was going to love it. But the problem was, those are fossils, but they are brachiopod fossils. He thinks that dinosaurs are a lot cooler. So I had to kind of change the way I'm thinking and see from a perspective of somebody who just knows very base level stuff, may only be attracted to certain things. So when I talk about volcanoes, I might talk about the more popular ones, or make comparisons to more well-known ones. You have to really hone in on what they're already familiar with. So when I went forward talking to, this 7-year-old who's like 10 now, I talk about this being older than the dinosaurs. It's this much older. I'm relating it back to the thing they're already familiar with and interested in, and kind of trying to pull them closer to this other topic. So just really addressing what they already think is cool, and then trying to convince them that the other thing is related and also very cool.
If I might add there, if people are looking to sort of connect with, regardless of your target audience, AGI, the American Geoscience Institute, not sure if people might be familiar with that resource, but they have a resource called, it's the Earth Science Literacy Principles, which really looks at these 9 big ideas. I asked Gary Lewis when he was director years ago, why 9, Gary, why not 10? It just seems like a funny number, but it takes you through from, and Chris touched on this earlier in his talk, just number 1, the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, starting with the age of the Earth and sort of successively working your way through some of these really big ideas, these big concepts. And number 9 is that the Earth provides the resources that we use and we depend on. So those are really great stepping stones, or kind of jumping off points to be able to engage with dialogue and conversations with people. But if I can roll it back to something I said earlier, when to me communication is about connecting, it is really knowing your target audience and being able to engage and meeting people with where they are. So sometimes it's not so much you sharing information, but just asking questions. You know, where did they grow up? What sort of an environment? So their educational background or their family background or the sorts of careers that they might be exposed to, just finding something in which you can connect with people and using that as a jumping off point to sort of start those sorts of dialogue. And then the other thing I'll just mention is just hands-on is minds-on. So anytime, to Kate's point too, if you can bring in something tangible, something physical that people can touch and feel, and they can using their senses, then that's your hook. And then once you hook people, and then they start to ask questions, and then you can just go into so many various interesting depths of a conversation. So I never show up with just if it's a public lecture, yes, but I tend to always come with all sorts of stuff. My magic box of tricks, basically, because it's just so much more engaging to hook people in that way.
Oh, fantastic. And I see Chris has put the link on the chat there, so I encourage everyone to check that out as well. Excellent. Another question we got in here. I'll direct this at you, Taija. What is your 30-second elevator speech on why economic geology matters?
It's very easy to make this more than 30 seconds, and I probably just wasted 15 there just saying that. But yeah, no, the modern society just wouldn't exist without it is the simple answer, and the energy transition certainly won't exist without it. So yeah, it's absolutely essential, not only our current way of life, but also if we do want to move away from fossil fuels, then mining is absolutely essential. So that's basically it. Excellent.
And kind of tying into that, another question here, I'll leave this one open for anyone that wants to leap on it. How can the mining industry make jobs more attractive for young professionals? After you, Kate.
I actually saw someone talking about this specifically at the International Meeting for Applied Geoscience and Energy last year. There was someone who was very passionate. I can't remember his name. He was basically pleading with companies to let their employees document what they're doing at their jobs. Show what these jobs actually look like. A lot of companies have a very strict social media policy. Do not post about things, and there is a reason for it. You can't post about confidential information. Certain projects, there's a privacy level for clients and for projects, but with certain measures in place, encouraging your employees to show other people what they do for work, it really will improve people's desire or well-informedness to work in that field, knowing what it is, what people like, what you have to go to school for and learn all these things. This is how it's being applied in this sort of job. That can be really encouraging to people who otherwise wouldn't have known.
Thank you, Kate. Getting a lens into actually what mining day-to-day might look like is really important. And if you want to take it away there, Chris, I see you've opened up your mic.
Yeah, well, I was just going to pick up on, it sounds like I'm kind of following Kate around really, but like Geologists, who I know Kate is familiar with, I mean, I think when we were at the Digital Geoscience Communication, where there was a talk there, and the same thing came up about this idea that if you're really closed door in terms of what you're wanting to share with the public, it breeds distrust. And also on top of that, it also means that people are wholly unaware of what you do. So it's like a lose-lose situation. So in many ways, you win the kind of confidentiality battle, but you lose the war of the, if you've got a consent-based exploration program, you won't be able to get it because people think you're keeping things from them. So yeah, it's just the worst decision, but it's a very common one being made, I think, by not just mining companies, but by many companies.
Go for it, Tasia. Thanks, Chris.
So yeah, these are all very good points. I'd like to just add that just emphasizing that it's not all about the extractive process. There are so many roles, and that sort of links back to what Kate said about people showcasing what they do. There are loads of roles in sort of environmental monitoring, environmental assessments as well. So it's not only the extractive side, it's also the environmental side of it, of mining, which is really important. There are loads of roles in that too, both within the companies themselves, but also in sort of governmental organizations.
No, thank you. Thank you. That's great. And touching on Geologize, it's a great tool. I think it's great access across a lot of universities. So if you're tuning in and you know your organization or university offers it, I really recommend completing that course. It's a great introductory span across geoscience communication. I'll keep an eye on time. We're about wrapping to a close here. Thanks for everyone's questions. Really appreciate it. I think just to end off here, we'll go in with a closing statement from everyone. Essentially, I'll invite everyone to sum up, any takeaway messages and what people can do right now to improve their skills in geoscience communication. So I'll start with you, Amanda.
I'm going to sort of go back and summarize what I mentioned before. If you're not sure where to start, like I said, the AGIs, Earth Science Literacy, sort of those really big ideas is a great way just to get comfortable with sort of content and stepping stones. And for me, again, it's, it's hands-on is minds-on. So any opportunity that you have to bring in something physical, tangible, and to be able to talk about that and to share and to make those connections to people, I think is a great starting place.
Well, thank you. And yourself, Kate, do you have any takeaway messages for the crowd listening in on what people can do to improve?
I definitely agree that the Geologize course was extremely helpful for me to take, a few years ago, and now it's great that I get to be a part of it and to help get more people to learn about this stuff. If you're curious about the course, if you are a member of SEG, you have free access to the course already. I will follow up with Max, and I'll get that information sent out to all the attendees, as you guys have access to it if you're a member of SEG or any other member society of AGI. There are so many different places that have free access already. So it's a resource that's out there that has shown to help a lot of people improve their communication skills, so that we can make this field better.
Excellent. We'll make sure to circulate that around to the group after this. And I'll invite you, Tasia, to give some closing words to the group here.
I guess I would just say that anybody who's interested in this sort of thing, and obviously you are because you are here, then I would just say then just begin and to start somewhere, because the only way to improve communication is to do it and to assess what the reaction is, and are you getting through and why not, and is terminology, illustration, what can you improve, and just learn from experience. And that's the only way to get better. So yeah, it's a lifelong process. You just have to practice and practice again. And I'm still learning, but actually that also makes it fun, because you keep learning new things and picking up new tricks and tips. So that's all great. So yeah, just start doing it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And we'll close with Chris. And if you'd like to share some final words to the group.
Yeah, just to pick up from what Taya said, I think there's two things. One is democratize geoscience communication, right? Everybody can do it. I hate the idea that some people are born to do it and some people aren't. These people should and these people shouldn't. And that relates to my second point, which is that geoscience communication can happen anywhere. So if you're worried about standing on stage in front of hundreds of people, that's not geoscience communication. That's not the only version of it. Geoscience communication is also talking to your family, around the kitchen table at breakfast. It's also when you're out in a cafe or the pub with your friends. It's when you're cycling or running with pals and you point out rock formations by the side of the path or whatever it is. It can happen in so many different ways, and therefore I think so many different people can actually do it. So yeah, like Taya said, get on with it.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for taking the time to, present and share everyone's views. I think everyone, no matter if you're a student or industry member or in academia, can take away a lot from this conversation. I will keep a note. There's lots of questions in the chat, so that's really great. I would encourage all of our panelists, if you're comfortable, to share where you can, we can find where you are, whether that's a social media tag, YouTube channel, kind of what's going on, so people can follow up. And if you would like to answer any of the questions that we have in the chat as well, feel free to do that. I'm sure that would be much appreciated. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for organizing.
Excellent. Okay, so that was a great conversation. And if you'd like to rewatch it, of course, there'll be a recording of this posted online in the upcoming weeks. But for now, we'll now transition on to opportunities if you're an SEG student member and what some of the students have been getting onto. So I'll just get that back up and running here. Okay, so to start this segment off, I'd like to introduce David Cook. So David can't join us today, but he kindly agreed to give a great interview a few weeks ago. And David Cook is now the new editor of Economic Geology, SEG's premier journal. And he's been associate editor prior 23 years to this appointment. He's also the director for CODES, which is the Center for Ore Deposit and Earth Sciences at the University of Tasmania. And he collaborates with students, postdoctoral researchers, industry to investigating hydrothermal and magmatic processes that lead to porphyry copper deposit formation and epithermal deposit formation. So I'd now like to ask Duncan to switch over to the video we have with David. I'm grateful to be joined today by Dr. David Cook, Director of Codes at the University of Tasmania and newly appointed editor of Economic Geology, SEG's premier publication. So I'd like to say thanks to David for taking the time to speak with me today and sharing insights for 2024 Earth Day. And firstly, I'd like to pass over to you so you can tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Max. Thanks for considering me for today's session. It's a great privilege to be able to participate in this event. Look, I've been around the traps for quite a while. I've been the associate editor of Economic Geology for 23 years prior to stepping into the editor role. So I've been handling manuscripts for the journal for quite a long time. But in my research career, I'm probably best known for my research into porphyry, copper and epithermal gold deposits. And I've been able, or I've had the privilege to work all around the world in Asia, through the Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, into South and North America, into Europe and North through Australia for researching these deposit types. And I have had the joy of working in Africa on some of the sediment-hosted systems as well. So I've had a global purview over my research career. It means I've got out and met a whole lot of brilliant young scientists coming through in all these different jurisdictions. So I'm really pleased to be able to take on the role of editor of Economic Geology and work with all of the community of our society for basically bringing the science forward into the 21st century.
That's great to hear, David. I'd like to follow up with that, saying what will this role as editor of Economic Geology involve?
Yeah, so look, it's a really exciting opportunity. There's only been 6 editors in 119 years prior to me getting this role. So there's quite a heavy weight or a burden of expectation as to what comes with the role, because economic geology has wound up having a preeminent status in terms of ore deposit research. And it communicates both to our academic community in terms of the science of economic geology, but we also have a huge cohort of readers from the exploration and mining community. So the journal is quite unusual in that it has to straddle sort of process-driven thinking all the way through to deposit characterization to help explorers and miners understand the deposits they're working on. So maintaining the integrity of the journal in terms of the quality of the peer review process. I've been given that privilege of working with our 30 associate editors to keep that peer review process, making sure that the 80 papers we choose to publish each year are of the highest possible quality. But also the challenge there is to make sure that we stay abreast of the evolving science of economic geology. There's lots of new research fields, new commodities and the like coming on board. So we have to be dynamic and adapting as we move forward to be reflective of our community science. So lots of exciting challenges to take on there in this editorial role.
Oh, fantastic. Exciting times ahead, for sure. Excellent. I'd like to switch the focus now to Earth Day and the theme. So this Earth Day, we're focusing on communication within geoscience. And I'd just like to ask, from your perspective, why is it important to communicate geoscience to the public? And how do we improve communicating technical topics to non-technical audiences?
All right. So this is a pretty burning issue, I think, for geoscience. At least in the Western world, we've seen enrolments in geosciences halve in many Western countries over the last decade. So we're seeing a diminishment of the number of people taking on geosciences for their education and for potential careers. And that's at a time when we're really requiring more geologists to help confront the climate crisis. Okay, so the transition to a low carbon energy future is requiring that we need a lot more resources and new types of resources, critical metals and strategic metals, to help us underpin that energy transition. So we need to be able to communicate with the general community the importance of geosciences to everyday life. And we need to do that in a simple and convincing and compelling way so that people can understand and embrace just how important geosciences are to everyday living, to being able to deliver the resource base that allows us to maintain a high standard of living and to continue to develop and grow our society as we continue to see population increase across the planet. Everyone should be aspiring to the highest quality standard of life. Geologists help us to achieve that goal, but only if we can communicate convincingly and effectively in simple terms. So ultimately, that communication, we really do need to be able to communicate convincingly without drowning in jargon. If we use lots of confusing and confounding words, and geology is full of such words, we lose the audience. So somehow we need to be able to communicate effectively. And that's the challenge of the new generation of geoscientists, being able to win the hearts and minds of our community and help them understand how we can help to address the serious challenges that our whole global community is facing.
Oh, fantastic. Finally, I'd just like to ask, do you have any advice for the future generation of students tuning in, and for that matter, geoscientists as well?
Right. So look, if you're starting out on a career as a geoscientist, one of the most important things is to hone your written and your oral communication skills. If you are an effective communicator, that sets you up for success throughout your career. It doesn't matter if you're an academic, an industry geologist, government geologist, a survey geologist, or just an enthusiastic member of the community. If you can communicate your ideas convincingly, if you can have persuasive arguments that help to bring people to an understanding of your point of view and an appreciation of what you have to say, then you really are setting yourself up for success. From an editor's point of view, from the journal, what I'd recommend to anyone who is thinking about submitting papers to economic geology, if you're a student, take a look at the instructions for authors very early on. Get yourself familiar with how the journal looks to publish papers, what the general length of a paper is. Find a paper that you found really inspirational, one that communicated effectively. Look at why you think that was so effective in its communication and try to emulate it. Be inspired by high quality work and use that as your framework, while also understanding if you set your paper up from day one with the right formatting, you accelerate the review process and you help your work get out there to the public as quickly and effectively as possible.
Oh, amazing. Thanks for your advice, David. I'm sure it'll be very helpful for many of the students tuning in. And in general, thanks for your time today and sharing your insights with the group.
Yeah, thank you so much, Max, and really appreciate you inviting me to be part of today's session.
Well, thanks again to David for taking the time to give that interview, and hopefully it was useful for those aspiring to publish in economic geology, as well as some insight for the students we have joining us. Okay, so I'll go back to the student opportunities part. So would like to now proceed on to Chanda Kadotobwe and Laseli Kunda from the Zambia SEG Student Chapter. So Chanda is president, Laseli is vice president, and they're going to share with us today some insight into the student opportunities within SEG, such as funding as an SEG student member, as well as highlight some of the opportunities they've had through SEG to go into the field. So I'd now like to pass it over to Chanda and Laseli.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, Max, could you stop sharing your screen?
Yep, all good now.
Perfect. Okay, hello, everyone. I don't want to say good morning or good afternoon or good evening because we've got people from around the world. So it's best to say hi, but I hope everyone's doing good. Thank you for attending. Thanks to Max and I know there's a lot of people in the background like Duncan, who always putting a lot of effort into SEG activities. So my name's Chanda, and I'm the president of a student chapter. We've got Liseli, who is my vice president. She won't be part of the presentation. I'm presenting alone, but I know she's here with us. So we're talking about student opportunities today. What's happening? Okay, so this is the layout for the presentation. We've got why start a chapter, starting a chapter, running a chapter, being a student member, and so on. So why start a chapter? Starting a chapter is good because you get access to professional development through workshops, seminars, and field trips, which enhance your skills, and with good skills means good career prospects. There you've got networking opportunities, so you're able to connect with your peers, faculty, and industry professionals. SEG, like Mark said at the beginning of the webinar, is a network of about 6,000 people with about, within 100 countries, 100 plus countries, if I'm not mistaken. So that's basically globally. You want to talk to people who understand what you're saying. Today we're talking about communication. So you want people who would not only not understand, but people would understand what you're saying. You want them, so if you're having a beer, you'd still be able to talk about whatever your favorite deposit type is. Access to resources. So we've got, SEG has a lot of resources for research, fieldwork, and funding opportunities. If you're talking about research, when you're a student member, you've got access to the journal, which is always very informative, especially if you're trying to fill in your assignments. Community engagement. So you engage in outreach activities, which is what we're trying to do today. It's an outreach activity, but I think we need to get boots on the ground and spread the word as much as possible. So recognition and awards, for achievement in excellence in geoscience, economic geology in particular. So I was looking at the website the other day, and I saw there's always, annually, there's always awards that the SEG gives, like the Brian Skinner Award. There's a Distinguished Lecturer Award. It's always good to have something you can show for your hard work at the end of the day. And leadership excellence, experience, sorry. You get to feel what it's like to be a leader when you're in a chapter, because it's, if you're part of the executive, it's your first time trying to lead people. And more importantly, you'll be leading them in a sector that you'll be working in. So like for me, I'm being the president, it's been a very interesting experience thus far, trying to delegate work, trying to talk with people, not stepping on people's toes. And I've already learned so much over the past, I think, 6 or so months. So, or to sum it up, the reason you start a chapter is because whatever society you're in, societies work best when you're together. You go far when you go together. If you want to go fast, you go alone. But when you're together, you will go far. That's, yeah, sure. So for SEG, we come together to advance the global society through rocks. So it's way cooler than other societies. Not everyone can say they look at rocks for a living and be able to help people by looking at rocks, even though it's tedious. There's so many minerals you have to think about. So this is a small schematic of student membership. There are plenty of benefits. So once you're a paid up member, like I was saying, you're able to participate in chapter activities, field trips, seminars, and other activities organized by the chapter, research grants and graduate fellowship programs, network with the over 6,000 members from around the world. It's a really huge community, but definitely a global society. And lastly, you get a chance to develop your soft skills such as leadership. So to sum up everything I've just said, because it's a lot of words and nobody likes to read that much, all you need to do to start a chapter is read the operation guidelines and the student chapter bylaws, appoint your executive committee with an academic advisor, an industry advisor, and submit forms to student services and await approval. Once you do that, you're in business. So now you're active. What happens next? Let the president lead. That is, you should have fun, but a productive time. Yeah, I think for me, that's the main thing. As much as you're having fun, always remember to have a productive time. Logging core is fun when you're looking for mineralization, but if you're talking about barren rocks, it's boring, but you always want to record whether the rocks are barren or mineralized. Then apply for the Stuart Wallace funding. So chapters have the Stuart R. Wallace Fund, which is available twice per year, 2 rounds. And you have access to money for your field trips or whatever you want the chapter to be doing throughout the year. The student chapter should submit the annual report and membership info to SEG by September 30th of each year. So yeah, that goes back to as much as you're having fun, always remember to record your fun. I want to see your videos when you go on your field trips. I want to see your photos, your vlogs, whatever you do when you're on a field trip or whatever your chapter is having. The SEG always wants to know what's going on, want to see what our fellow students are doing through the newsletter and stuff like that. If you receive Stuart Wallace funding, you need to report on how those funds are spent. So yeah, accountability, you always have to be accountable for whatever you do. Repeat steps 1 through 4. It's a very easy process, 4 steps and you're running a chapter. So yeah, like I said, it's as easy as it looks, but always remember to follow the chapter guidelines or bylaws and submit your reports. No 2 ways about it. So funding opportunities, we've got the Michael J. Fitzgerald Student Mapping Course, MJF, where you're able to learn, improve upon, and practice your field skills through US Field School. So you're going in the field and mapping, which is the #1 skill a geologist needs to have. You need to be able to map regardless of where you are or the rocks you are finding in the field. Then the student field trip. So every year there are various field trips to, well, not various, sorry, but a single field trip to various mining districts around the world. This year, even though submissions are closed, I think it should be Brazil. Yeah, it should be Brazil. Last year, it was a trip to Nevada, United States. Student research grants. So $1,000, $5,000 grants for research in economic geology. That's a lot of money. And it's only for you to do your research. Then graduate student fellowship grants. So you've got $2,500, $10,000 grants for first year postgrad students. Emphasis on first year postgrad. Then you've got the Stuart R. Wallace Fund, like I said, which is $500 to $1,500 grants for student chapters running field-based activities. So even though I've only made 5 points, there are plenty of funds available to students. You've got the Spores Explorer, you've got the James Morley. Oh, and I shouldn't forget to mention, there's funding for the AGM. So please make sure you apply, whether you're paid up or not. I know SEG always goes a long way for students, so please make sure to apply for funds. The deadline is tomorrow. So once the webinar ends, get to the website. These are a few photos from the various chapter activities. So the chapter was formed in 2022, and it basically had its first year of operation last year. So to the top of the left, we had an industry visitor who came talk to us about what life is like as an exploration geologist. Then the top right corner, we had Chris Wiggins. Yeah, he's the group geophysicist for First Quantum Minerals. Came talk to us about geophysics in the Central African Copper Belt. Then the bottom left is a photo from the last time Murray Hitzman was here. He talked in depth about the Central African Copper Belt. I was so lost, but I think it helped a lot now that getting towards graduating. Then the last trip was a field trip to Kansanshi Mining, to Kansanshi Mine rather, run by First Quantum. It's in Solwezi, so it was about maybe 600 km from Lusaka, where the chapter is. And the trip was funded by the Stuart Wallace Fund. So there's proof we're not talking from without. There's proof of funding being released for chapter activities. So we had a great time, and it just goes to show that the SEG is not a society only for industry or academia. It's got a key concern in student activities. Yeah. So I think that comes to the end of our presentation. Thanks, Max. I end there.
Well, thank you for giving a great presentation there, Chanda. I hope it was, hope a lot of students tuning in gained a lot of information there. As Chanda said, please check out the website after this talk finishes and make sure to apply for funding. And if you're in research as well, submit an abstract. It's going to be a great conference this year in Namibia. So thank you very much. Now we'll proceed on with the event. So I'd now like to introduce Anne Thompson, and you may know Anne already as the host of the SEG Discovery to Recovery podcast, but Anne is also a consultant with Petroscience Consultants, in addition to be the SEG president-elect. So Anne will be presenting the winners of the SEG Student Chapter podcast competition, which was run by the Discovery to Recovery team earlier this year, and also share some concluding remarks for today's event. So now I'd like to welcome Anne to share her screen and present the awards.
Thank you, Max. Yeah, let
problem.
me just get this. Are we good?
Yeah, looks good, Anne.
All right. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, thank you everybody for hanging on here for the big reveal of the Student Chapter Podcast Challenge Awards. I just like I'll go quickly through a couple of things. We initiated this challenge not really knowing how it would go or how much response. It was an idea from the Discovery to Recovery podcast team that was built out with the SEG support, and we just are thrilled with the response. It's been fantastic and really exciting to see all the entries come in from all around the world. So we have 3 winners. Third place gets 500 US, and second place 1,000, and first place $2,000 US. So there's a bit at stake in this, and I have to say, we didn't expect necessarily to get entries from everywhere. We have from 5 continents and 18 amazing entries. The margins were very close. It was a challenging competition to judge for sure, but it was really pleasing to get these entries from Asia, from North and South America, from Europe, and just fantastic. The Australians, unfortunately, were all on holiday, so we don't have anything from Australia, but we're going to rectify that. We hope to run this competition again on an annual basis. So those who don't succeed today, we encourage you to keep honing your skills and look forward to the next competition. And we'll be building that out over the coming few months. So on this list, I would like to highlight there were 3, so we'll do my 3 honorable mentions first. And those go to the University of Athens, the China University of Geosciences in Beijing, and the University of Leeds. And I have to say again, it was very close, guys, and you did a phenomenal job. So going first to our bronze winners, we have from, drum roll, the Pennsylvania State University. So hosts Rory Changling and Alex, I'm going to butcher his name, Derminaro, did a great job with their episode. They were able to utilize the studio, which helped them out a little bit, but they provided a great discussion between the 2 of them about how they got into their careers, and their episode was entitled "The Podcast That Brought Down a Government." So the podcast, sorry, what a slip. The deposit that brought down a government. There probably are podcasts that brought down governments too, which explores Rory's experience in Greenland and how he went from being what you might call a pure geoscientist to someone who understands the impact that economic geology has and mining has in our society. So that was fun and entertaining, and they definitely got highest marks for entertaining conversation. So moving on to the next award, to our silver medal, and again, drum roll and huge applause for Universidade de Brasilia. So they had a fantastic interview with Professor Reinhard Adolfo Fuch, and he is a classic and renowned geologist in Brazil who has had a tremendous impact on mapping Brazil and understanding the tectonics of Brazil. And so this was just a lovely interview where you get to hear from one of our classic geologists about his story and also how he's interacted with early career scientists over the course of his career. So he was born in 1940, and this is the map on the left there of the geology of Brazil as it was in 1960. And I don't have a current map, and a lot of the work that he's done, a lot of amazing geochronology work, and still publishing now in 2024 with recent publications. So that was a really lovely episode and very nicely done interview. So huge kudos to them. So for our big reveal, we have our gold medal winners, and it's very exciting. Again, coming from South America, from a country that actually has some of the most listeners to Discovery to Recovery. We have Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos from Lima, Peru. So huge congratulations and big claps go to this crew. And they did, again, a lovely interview. They had their guest, Diana. Again, I'm going to butcher all my Latina sort of Latin pronunciations. Aparicio, and she gave a nice technical but accessible conversation about how hot spring deposits as a key finder for ore deposits along the Peruvian Andes. And so that was just, they had a lovely intro and outro, they had great music, they credited everything, and they gave us some nice chapter notes to go with it. So fantastic work. Very good episode, and we thank all of these teams for contributing in the way that they have. So I'd just like to say that coming up, what we plan to do is probably take 9 or 10 of the episodes, and we'll repackage them and put them out on Discovery to Recovery. So that won't happen immediately, but expect to see that over the next 2 or 3 months, that there'll be 3 episodes, special episodes with just the student contributions, but they'll also be available on the SEG website. So all of the contributions, all 18, everybody, they'll have access to a public link where other people can come and listen to your episode. So that's very exciting. And I think the range of topics we saw, from very technical to what's it like to be an early career geoscientist, to social impact, to it just covers the whole range that Discovery to Recovery covers. And I was really very pleased to see that all the creativity and all the work that went into all of these. So thank you again to everyone for participating, and look forward to the next one. So just in closing, my final comments, I mean, there's not much to say after that fantastic panel and the things that have been talked about today. Communication is vital in everything that we do, from our science to talking to each other. Discovery to Recovery is all about communicating with other geoscientists. So we have 3 episodes on geoscience communication, which are out there, 37, 38, and 39, to help you collaborate. But there's also to collaborate, to learn more about geoscience communication in addition to today. But we also need to be able to talk to the public. We need to be able to communicate with clients. It's just such a huge subject. And I think our panel really did that very well. The only thing I would add in addition is really consider collaboration as well. Really consider how, as UBC chapter has done today with Zambia, is reaching out to other people, is working together, and that crosses again all boundaries. So I think that's a key thing to think about, and just go forth and do it. Geoscientists understand the heterogeneous Earth. We understand complexity. We work in teams. We have a lot of skills, and we actually do enjoy talking to each other. So just keep honing those skills and go and do it. And I think with that, last plug, Geologists is available to all SEG members. It's already out there. There's an email that's gone out to, if you're a member, you have access. So please go and check that out. It's been fantastic to have Kate Larson here again today to talk about that. So Max, I think over to you.
Well, thanks, Anne. Fantastic. Lots of great words there. And I think congratulations to all the winners. It was a fantastic competition, absolute joy to listen to all the entries, and we hope to run it again and see what else is in store for the future in terms of the podcast from SEG. So that's great. I think it's just a few words from myself now to close out the event here. So I'll just like to say that SEG will be in touch with the winners shortly to discuss those awards. It'll be great to see what those financial contributions do. I'm sure a few of you will have put on some exciting field trips or training opportunities within your chapters. So please share that with us as well. So I'd like to say as well that Discovery to Recovery is online, season 4. We're sponsored by Anglo American. So thank you, Anglo American, for sponsoring season 4. You can listen to these podcasts anywhere you would find them as a typical podcast. So on Apple Music, Spotify, but they're also available on the SEG website. So you can delve into stories and up-to-date discussions relevant to economic geology. And again, I'd encourage you to listen to 37, 38, and 39, as Anne pointed out. And we're really excited to let everyone know that SEG 2024 conference is hosted in Windhoek in Namibia this year. In late September. So registration's opened. This is a great opportunity for students, early career professionals, seasoned geologists, and it's in a really geologically unique and culturally vibrant part of the world. So we hope to see you there, and numerous field trips are on offer, selling out, I believe, quite quickly. So please look at those, and if you're interested in signing up to one, get in there as early as you can. And there'll be some workshops as well, and several student and ECP focused initiatives. And the overall theme of this conference is sustainable mineral exploration and development. So we have key 8 themes for the event. From top to bottom, these are the energy transition, metals of the future, specialty metals and materials, innovative technology developments in mineral deposit science, Africa's iconic ore deposits, new discoveries and developments, resource development, ESG from exploration to remediation, gold, enhanced discovery and development, and vital high-volume base metals. So a bit of something for everyone. We really encourage you to sign up to one of these and submit your abstract if your research fits in one of these themes. And just to close off here, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's session. I hope you got a lot out of today's conversations. And thank you to all our speakers today. So Steve, Chris, Taija, Kate, Amanda, David, Chanda, Laseli, and Anne. And thank you to the work behind the scenes by Duncan and Katie from SEG as well. It's all due to their support that these events can happen. And thank you to the UBC team and the Zambia team for putting together this collaborative event as well. Thank you to all our members out there as well. A reminder to take the survey that we'll send out shortly to see if there's any feedback you would suggest when we run these webinars in the future. And otherwise, we'll see you in Windhoek, Namibia, or the next SEG event. So thank you, everyone, and take care.